and it's basically turned into like creating the backstory for a character. So it's kind of fun. I improv the whole thing. I don't even look at the character ahead of time.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Randall Hampton. Welcome to Drawing Conclusions. On a new night, we've decided to try something different. We're going to try moving the show from Friday afternoons to Wednesday nights now. I think we just have a better chance of interacting more and in a better way with our audience. So, thanks for joining us here this evening. I hope you got to watch Zach play some Papers, Please. That game is amazing. I think it's hilarious. I hope you enjoyed that if you were hanging out with him, and thanks so much for sticking around and hanging out with us. This evening, I'm very, very, very happy to say that I have a special guest. Miss Shawna Spain is going to be joining with us. You may know her as like Seven Spoon on Twitter. So, hey, Wandering Shrink, thanks for joining us. So I'm super excited. The last episode of Drawing Conclusions and going forward for the next few episodes, we're gonna be focusing really a lot on tabletop role playing games and things like that. And I'm really excited because Shauna is here today, and we're gonna be talking about character. We're gonna talk about character creation and how they kind of fit into our worlds that we create as DMs. Now, Shauna, thanks so much for joining me.
Yes.
Why don't
Thank you so
you
much for having me.
take a few moments those in the audience or those that are watching that may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Shawna Spain. Yes, I'm known as like Seven Spoon on the internet. I stream. I've taken a break, but I usually stream quite a few D&D games. When the quarantine hit, I added things to my schedule because we found that talking about D&D in my household calmed me down from panicking. My husband realized that if I was panicking and he said, "Hey babe, what are we doing on Monday for shift?" Where were we going? I would calm down to talk about it. So we added it quite a bit. We added quite a bit. So I run a game on Monday that's not streamed. I find that having not streamed games gets you a different game. So I like having one. And
Sure.
then on Tuesday, we stream Treasure Tuesdays, which I believe those are the characters we'll be dealing with today.
Okay.
And then on Saturdays, I'm streaming a game we're calling Broken Bane, which is quite fun. And then on Sunday, I stream a storytelling sort of experiment, which is ending up being a lot about character creation, both improving it and developing it with a single player. So that's quite fun as well. And
Oh,
then I
great.
run a game called Dungeons and Doggos for people that are brand new to D&D, if they've never played or even experienced players that just want to like play a dog for a while. I have characters I create myself, and I invite people on, and it was a really good way to introduce people to the game, which was a lot of fun.
Great.
So yeah, that's kind of me. I do a lot with mental health and accessibility advocacy. I am autistic and I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. So that wheelchair mod for D&D, I'm so excited. And I talk a lot about how to deal with how to use D&D to calm yourself down and interact with other humans in a way that has like rules and stuff. And so I talk a lot about that kind of thing.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for joining me again. I'm super
Yeah.
excited. So tonight we're actually going to be drawing. I'm going to be working specifically on making game tokens, headshot game tokens for Shauna's game. And so we're going to be working through some of the characters that her players have currently, and as I'm drawing them, we're going to be talking about about some of Shauna's goals with her players when she sits down with them when they start doing character creation, when they do their session zero, and where their characters fit in their world. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that with each character as we kind of bop from one to another. We'll see how many we get to tonight. We usually
Yeah.
we run about an hour and a half or so for these shows.
Yeah.
So if we get really into it and we're having a lot of fun, maybe we'll go
Yeah.
2 hours. I don't know. I think that's going to be the cap for
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
But we'll for sure get some drawings in. I don't know if we'll get to color or not, but I'm excited to start these from scratch with you, just to see how
Mhm.
you
That'd be fun. Yeah.
yeah
You've
how
you've
you
done
react
art
to
for
it.
me before. Yeah, I was so excited to be invited on because I love your art. I have your books. I give them to people. I think they're really good, and I've commissioned some art myself. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Two of my players from Broken Bane got art from you. It's fantastic. And when I proposed to Treasure Tuesday, I was like, how do y'all feel about art? If you don't have an artist, can I recommend one? And I recommended you, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. So they all want to do it. And I was just
Fantastic.
absolutely tickled. So yeah, this should be
Great.
fun.
Great. Okay. Well, then let's go ahead and let's get started.
Yeah.
While we're doing this, let's pick one to start from. I don't know which one. You can
Sure.
tell me which one you'd like to do first.
Let's see. Well, we've got a Loxodon, which I think would be very interesting to draw. The player knew me pretty well, and I love elephants. And he was like, "I'm gonna play an elephant person with this really intricate backstory," and I was like, "I'm so excited!" And then we've got my husband, who is currently green. His character is currently bright green because of a thing he did. We would rather not draw his token that way, but
Okay.
he's got some really interesting stuff there. We've also got an Asimar. I'm really interested to see how we would like work in the wings, because sometimes they're out and sometimes they're not. I don't know how we put that in. They're all kind of fascinating. How about we start with the first human who got back to me. So let's start with Brandel. He's a
Okay.
Furbolg.
Okay.
I let the players describe their characters to me, obviously, because
Sure.
they're characters. He's got a gray skin tone, green eyes. He's got shaggy, longish hair, slightly unkempt facial hair, and a scrawny build. He's got cheap scavenged clothes, which come from his backstory. And an interesting thing about him is he had a fairly sparse backstory when he came to me. And I was like, that's fine. You do not need to figure everything out. What we can do is during the campaign, as we play, as you find things that work for you, you can work them into your backstory. I'm totally cool with that.
Absolutely.
And so one of the fun things is he rolls really high on perception, but he doesn't always share it with the group. And by doesn't always, I mean just doesn't share it with the group. So one session, we're on a beach, and he has a high perception, and he chooses in that moment to share what he found out, which was really fortuitous because someone definitely could have died. And so since then, there's this running joke on stream that he's a beach furbolg. So he would like maybe some short fisherman pants, kind of thing in there. So that's one of the most fascinating character stuff for me is when you can sort of sink your teeth in and really show it in the campaign, whether it comes from the player's backstory or whether it comes from the player's play. He made that choice. He made that first comment, and so it was just super interesting to do. I like doing that. I love it when characters come or players come to me with backstories, but I prefer collaborative campaigns. There's nothing I have nothing against campaigns that are GM against the players, like if that's what you want to do it. But I prefer campaigns that are collaborative, where a player can come to me and be like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And I can be like, awesome, that sounds really neat. Let's get you in a group and let's get the group together and let's iron out some details.
Well, let me ask you a question about that real quick. What is your philosophy about DMing? Like, how do you view DMing and running a game in general? Are you the kind of DM that just looks for the out and out challenge? Are you the player versus DM kind of DM, or are you the one that are you the rule of cool DM, or are you just trying to tell a good story?
I'm trying to tell a good story.
Okay.
I really appreciate the rule of cool GMs, and I really appreciate the players against GM style as well, because there's a lot of strategy involved in that. I prefer to tell stories. I've been a writer since I could hold a pencil, So when it comes to storytelling, I've always worked better when I had people that I could bounce ideas off of and I could work with. With D&D, you've got players right there that you have people to bounce your ideas off of, which is really neat. It allows you to have a relationship with your players that goes a little. There's so much adversary in my real life because I'm autistic and I'm constantly fighting social cues and things like that. To have an environment where we've entered into it knowing we're going to be collaborative, because I always set that up with my players ahead of time. I explain to them, like, I'm gonna do a storytelling thing. Do you want to come tell a story with me? If you don't want to, that's fine. But if you do, come over here and play with me. So I having that relationship where we're gonna build something together really appeals to me.
That's very much me as well. I'm the I mean, as a writer, as someone who as a let me put it this way, as a writer and a reader, I'm an avid fan of massive story. So and the epic tales and the ones that stretch on and go. Like, I'm the person that when I come to the end of a book series and it's done, I get angry. I'm not fulfilled.
Same. Yes, same.
I
No.
don't have that sense of fulfillment. I don't have that final enjoyment. I get angry because I want it to
Yeah.
keep going. I want to know
Yeah.
what
I want to know what
happens.
happens next.
Yeah,
Yes. Exactly.
yeah. So but
Yeah.
that's why I love D&D, because the
Mhm.
game, the story doesn't have to stop. I
Nope.
mean,
It can change. It can shift. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can have like I've had campaigns where there was a definite end point. You know, like
Hmm.
the main story had come to come to that climax, and there was resolution,
Hmm.
and we were all okay with that, moving on and then being done and going on to the next game, that kind of thing. But at the same
Hmm.
time, every time I talk to those friends, I want to go back. I want to play that game again. And
Yeah.
we actually thought about doing that, since quarantine and everything. We had talked about getting together over Zoom or over Discord or
Hmm.
whatever, and playing another game, but as the characters' children, like the
Oh,
characters.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so it was like
Oh, that could be very interesting.
our previous characters had done what they set out to do, and they had achieved whatever the goal was. But now let's jump ahead, 20 years. What's going on with their kids? What are their kids doing? What are they coming what are they coming of age and becoming? That kind of thing. So
That can be really interesting. And I also love it when like a character dies and they're like, "My twin has appeared." That's always kind of fascinating too. Like, what kind of changes do you make there? But the children could be really interesting because you can play with a lot of like, well, a lot of social either tropes or truisms. Like that can be like either fighting against them or leaning into them. Could be
yeah,
sorry,
so
really interesting.
it's a lot of fun too, because I've actually been thinking about it, and I've been thinking about what I would do, because the character that I had before was very much, um, he was melee DPS character, fighter to the end, and just jumping into the middle of the fray and doing as much damage as possible. That was his job. Um, but the whole point of who he was, he was trying to bring his the religion of his people back to life. It was all but
Okay.
snuffed out. And so the idea was that his kid would potentially be a cleric of that religion. Like he was brought up into it, and so he was trying to
Yeah.
further it on. So it's a completely different character type.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. So fun things like that I think.
Well, yeah, that would be really interesting because you'd have the lore from the father, right? The father
Yeah,
character, and seeing how that lore reflects is very interesting because it's not always how it would be interesting to see how it shows up in the son that the father wouldn't have expected. Because you're almost playing against yourself a little bit that way. That like how do you interpret that? It's
sure.
more. I would find it more interesting if you interpret it a little bit differently than the way it's intended. Could be kind of neat.
So how much how much does the character creation process? So when you sit down, before you sit down with your characters to do their character creation, before the session zero, you have an idea of what your world is and what your story is, right? I mean, do you?
Well, before I sat down with my first camp, so all three of my campaigns are in the same world.
Okay.
Before I sat down with that campaign, I decided a couple of things.
Quick
Like,
question: Do you do
yeah,
complete homebrew, or are you in Faerun, or?
homebrew. It's I
Okay,
actually the way I created my map is I took every die in my household, which
that's a lot.
is a lot
I know
of
you.
dice.
That's a lot.
Yeah, even at the time, this was a couple years ago, and I very gently for some of the dice because I have very fancy dice, chucked them at a table and took a picture, chucked it into a drawing program, and played with a couple of ways that it would. I took out all the big ones so I could have lakes and created a map that way. I've been thinking about expanding it. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a bunch of dice, chuck it at a table, take a picture, and add it on. I play with street names around where I live to get the names of countries and towns and things. So the name of the world is Azinlia,
Okay.
which came from a street near us named Azalea. which is actually the name of a very good friend of mine's baby now. And so I'm like super excited because technically I have a world that's kind of named after her. So the reason I started with a map, the first thing I actually start with my player characters is to make sure they'll all show up at the same time on the same day. If they can't, then they don't get to play that game. Yep. I need schedules, and then I wanted to make a map like that because I'd seen it on Twitter or something. Yes, Wordman lore. I'd seen it on Twitter or something, and I was just so entranced with the idea of taking all of our dice and throwing them at the table. And fortunately, my husband was supportive. The deal was the stone ones had to be gentle, but I've always loved maps. I think they're absolutely fascinating. Devin Rue is one of my favorite humans. I will never be able to do what she does. My stuff looks like scribbles, literally. But I love the idea of visualizing it at that scale and then filling in the details, right? Like I drew out the continent. I didn't peg in the towns until we talked as a group in the session 0. The very first town that got created came out of the session 0 when the characters figured out where they were going to like meet and stuff for Monday. And then when Treasure Tuesday met, I introduced them to the map. And I said, where do you guys want to start out? And I explained like some of the stuff that had already appeared from the first group. Same thing happened with the third group. I said, these are the things that are around. Where do you all want to start? And so we're building into that lore.
Yeah.
In Treasure Tuesday, there's a character that got an NPC that got created, a non-player character that got created because 2 of my player characters used to go to a lot of conventions. And so I needed a way to sort of yank them out of the game, but continue playing. I really liked the idea of that. Treasure Tuesday is 6 players so that I can do that. And instead of just, hand waving it and being like, they're just not here this week or puppeting them, what I did is I created an NPC called the Mistress, and she has hand wavy magic powers. And every now and then, when they need to be yanked out, I go, there's a noise, and suddenly Marthala and Relic are gone. And I did it sort of as a joke the first couple times. Like I got all the players involved to on board, but it's now has its own lore. Like we had a guest character that leaned into that. We had Shift is now seeing it. Broken Bane is seeing it. Like all 3 games are seeing the influence of the Mistress, and it's hilarious because it came out of me just wanting to pop people out of a game for those players, What
would be really a lot of fun? What would be a lot of fun is that if the Mistress puts a character from one game into another, and they just drop in.
Yeah. So we hadn't decided for a while on which time period each of the games were in, but the players really want to do a crossover, super badly.
Oh, I bet.
So I was working up to that for a Christmas game, but I had to take some time off to move, so that might move into the spring. I know some of the players are watching this, so don't get too excited. But 2 of the players in 2 of the games are the same. My husband and one of our best friends is in both games.
Okay.
So I need to sit down with both of them and figure out how they're going to do that. How are they going to play Druge crap? You've got too many names, Nate. Drew. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to look in the Discord. What's your damn name and Shift? Zatz. How is he going to play Druge and Zatz at the same time? How's the husband going to play Idris and Quentin? How are we going to do that? So it could be very interesting.
Take a moment and take a look at your surfer hippie Jesus Furbolg here.
I really like him. Wordman's in the chat too. Wordman, the guy that's in the chat, that's Randall.
Okay.
So yeah.
So Wordman, then you need to tell me: is this what you're envisioning with
I like
Brandel?
The Scraggle. I like the hair over the face because it gives him sort of a shy. And Brandel's quiet, and he turns invisible a lot when he gets startled. And so I like this. I like his facial expression too, because it's kind of like, yeah, okay, here's what we're doing, and this looks like somebody who sort of hovers around the edges of a group. I think that fits pretty well.
All right,
Wordman says that looks pretty good, so.
All right, well, let's have some fun with it then.
He says he likes the hair over the face too. I think that works really well. Oh, great. Now I've got 1 billion players in here. So the husband and the other our very good friend Tech is they're both in the chat. They're talking about which character will get along with the other. Um, Currently, some of their characters are fighting in one of the campaigns, which is a very interesting thing to do with a group. By the way, I don't recommend it unless you have a plan going into it. Because it can damage friendships dreadfully. But if you do it right, it can have really interesting character development.
It's fun. It's funny how that works out because these games. I mean, it's a game first and foremost. It is a game.
Yeah, it is a game.
We're sitting down and we're playing a part. You know, we're not.
Yes.
This isn't us, but at the same time, we put so much emotion and so much feeling into these characters,
yes.
and it really does. It becomes an extension of you. So when something happens to them, you almost can't help but take it personally.
Yes. So
how do you handle that?
Okay, so I have so many examples for this. So Quentin, one of the characters for Treasure Tuesday, very early in the campaign triggered a trap that made him green. He's bright green. And I know how long he's going to be green because I'm the GM. But I talked to him after the game and I was like, how much do you hate this? And he was like, I mean, is it forever? And I said, no. And he's like, then it could be interesting. We haven't actually played with it very much. I don't think people remember that he's green very often, but
has it come up?
Really could. It has a couple of times, but not as often as it could. Because in game he's still green, you know. But I checked with him afterward to be like, how much do you hate this? And if at any point in the future he's like, this just please change it back, because it is a story for all of us. I will make that change. Another better example probably is in one of my other campaigns, we had a guest player. He was there for one night. And he ended up, long story short, he stole the soul of one of the players. And so I said, your body sits on the floor and everything around you looks like fractured purples. And that's where we're going to end it for the evening. The player was not happy. I am not good at facial expressions, but I picked that up. Yeah. And so I followed him into the kitchen and I said, listen, I want you to know, before he could say anything, I said, listen, I want you to know I will snap my fingers and have your soul reappear. There are so many ways that I can do that. That's absolutely not a problem. What we also could do is you can play with you having a spirit body, because one of the other players could see spirits, and that could be kind of interesting because the dungeon you're in. Sure. Or you can have a twin brother, or maybe you have another character you want to play. You have opportunities here. I'll do anything you want. Go away and think about it. And he did. He went away and thought about it. And he came back and he was like, I want to do the one where I'm a spirit for a little while, but I don't want it to be forever. And I said, okay, what's the maximum number of sessions you'd be comfortable with? And he said, I think 2 or 3. And I said, great. And I crafted a story around that. It was very interesting because they had to like drag his body along and get through more traps. And he was able to walk through walls and stuff. And actually getting his spirit back into his body triggered them being pulled out of a treasure trove into a very dangerous situation. So it was excellent character building. Everybody was super engaged. It was super good. But you have to take the time. You have to take the time to check in with your players. It's a full thing for me. I try to check in with my players as often as I can, especially when something's gone a little wonky. Like somebody rolled bad on an alcohol check, like a constitution check, and so they got drunk, and they made decisions for their character based on that, and it upset a relationship in the game, like the characters in the game, not the players. And so I checked in with both of those players to be like, how we doing, you know? And they were like, no, I think this is good, you know. And we had a conversation about it. Another player dropped another player's character, like killed him. Oh. And I had a choice there to be like, he did, or to recover. And it's led to some really interesting character things because they had to get through. This was during the Tomb of Wonder. I threw that at them because I needed a break from my own story. And it led to some really interesting character decisions. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not always players playing against each other either, where they make interesting character decisions. Sometimes they'll make them just one-on-one. You know, either by like the beach furball thing that came out of nowhere. That came just from the player. And we've had other things similar to that. It really adds depth to those characters. I think it's really interesting.
when you are, I can only obviously I can only speak from my own experiences. When you're crafting your world,
Hmm.
and your character tells you something that is so against what you had in mind, or perhaps
Oh
so
God.
against. I mean, we all have our overarching themes and our
Yeah.
storyline and our BBEG that we want to see happen.
Yeah.
Um, when a player comes up with something or does something in game that is so against what you had planned,
Yeah.
how do you react to that, and how do you try and potentially bring that into the
Yeah.
game without completely
Losing
wrecking
your
it?
mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without going bonkers for sure.
Here's what I recommend to new GMs or GMs that are trying to figure this out. Either find yourself a group that will take your gentle or not so gentle suggestions to go left, God damn it, or get comfortable with the idea that your group is going to go right. And you can do that a number of different ways. Either you're amazing at improving entire pieces of worlds and NPCs and storylines and blah, 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 blah. And you can, it's no big deal. Or maybe you're more like me and you wanted to plan everything out and it's kind of frustrating. What I did to combat my, not combat, to work
Respond.
with my players, yeah, respond with my players going right instead of left is I started sketching in an entire world. And so my campaigns are persistent and I know what they're doing in other parts of the world at all
Okay.
times. I know what the other campaigns are doing at the same time as the other campaigns. We had a game where the job was to identify a murderer, and they were on his trail and they were following in tunnels underneath the town. And based on what they were doing, I was controlling the NPC, obviously, and they did something that meant my NPC had to make an on in the minute decision. They did something unpredictable. They went right instead of left because I knew exactly where all of the other NPCs above ground, what they were doing. I was able to make that call in that moment. And it worked really well. It was an excellent piece of storytelling. Now, there are other times where they go right instead of left, and I have nothing. Broken Bane did this to me a while ago. I gave them a train. I told them the back door was unlocked and that they needed to get on the train. And they were like, "Can we buy tickets?" And I was like, and I'd planned for that. I was like, "No, it's a private train. You can't buy tickets." And they were like, "Can we sneak on?" And I was like, "What do you, yeah, in the back door?" They were like, "No, like as like through the front doors. Can we sneak on? Can we like fabricate the tickets?" And in that moment, I hadn't thought of that and I didn't have a backup plan. And I was like, yes. And then we had a whole session where they did all this ridiculous stuff where they stole a dress and there were bees and it was just nonsense. It
And
was
there were
absolute
bees.
nonsense. And it took like 2 sessions for them to be like, maybe we should sneak through the back door.
How
And then
many?
they were really set on having disguises, so they raided luggage, and I was like, fine, one of them's a mimic. Like
Oh
I really
man.
went through it. It was a lot of fun. So what I find useful is setting up a framework, having some things you do know, but knowing enough about, like having enough touchstones or anchor points or whatever you want to call them, that you can respond to improv stuff, right? So I know what the train looks like. I can describe that. I know all the furniture that's in there because I built a map. I didn't know who all the NPCs were, and so I made those up depending on how they were moving through the rooms. The puzzles I did ahead of time, but they didn't touch like half the puzzles I made.
No, of course
Um,
not. They
I,
never do.
well, I made that many puzzles because I didn't know where they were going to go, right or left. I didn't know if I was going to drop enough good hints or they would get them or what. The GMs that are like, "Oh, they didn't touch my puzzles. I'm so upset." Okay, the puzzles they didn't touch, you can now use
You can use
later. And
later,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, but being able to recycle stuff is super important when you're a GM. So one thing that I try to model when I'm running Broken Bane, because that's sort of a learning campaign. That's one where if you want to learn how to run a game, watch that one because we model stuff a lot. Is I'll ask for pauses. I'll be like, okay, that's very interesting. I need a minute. And sometimes I'll think out loud. Sometimes I'll be like, what if this happened? And if my players are like, yes, do it, I'll be like, great. And it happens. And it can take some of the mystery away. You might find players that are like, I hate it. Don't tell me what's going to happen. Figure it all out yourself. But because I build campaigns and groups that are collaborative, they're usually pretty okay with that. And sometimes they're really into it. And that's actually what I do with characters as well. One thing that can be kind of tricky is when you're first coming out with a character, or even if it's an established character, like being like, yeah, hey Aaron, what does your character do? Can be a little like on the spot, like I don't know. So instead, what I'll do is I'll be like, hey Aaron, and I'm using my husband as an example because
You can.
I probably won't get in trouble for it later. I can be like, hey Aaron, do you think Quentin would reveal this piece of his reveal that piece of his backstory, or do you think and if I'm referring to stuff that's supposed to be secret, I do it in DMs and Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can be like, do you think that he would choose this moment to like try to make secret signals to Druge to point out the box, or do you think that Quentin would be more open about it, or do you think Quentin would encourage the group to keep moving so that he and Druge can come back to the box later? I literally just made up a scenario.
Sure.
And that gives the player an opportunity, because I preface the whole campaign with, I'm going to make suggestions. You can't ignore them, or you can take them, do whatever you want. That gives them the opportunity to be like, oh yeah, I do want to do option B. Or, oh, I don't want to do any of those, but this is the thought I had.
Sure.
So that gives them both a framework to move forward. So there aren't awkward pauses. There aren't people getting anxious, That can be super helpful with new players. I do it a lot with new players. As I get to know players and I get to know their characters a little bit better, my guesses get better. And it's a way of, I really don't like saying, what are you going to do? It's probably a holdover from not myself not liking open-ended questions. If somebody asks me, how are you? It doesn't mean how are you, it means hi. And if somebody says, what are you doing? It's like, I'm doing so many things right now. Be more specific. So it's probably a holdover from that, but it ends up having some really interesting storytelling. I've had players go with what I recommend, and I've had players be like, nuh-uh, I want to do this. Be like, great, do that.
Do that.
You have to be willing to do that,
I have had I've had characters that, or I've had players that are super great at improv, jump into the story, and really push the boundaries of where perhaps I was ready to go, and are great about moving the story forward, finding new little hitches and things like that. I've also had players that are cold fish. They're just kind of there, and they just kind of sit back. They don't contribute a lot. They're kind of waiting to like be pushed along that railroad. You know what I mean? Like pushed down the track on the way that you want to go.
Yeah.
The best thing that I've ever experienced, ever experienced as a dungeon master, is when those two people met, and the person that wasn't super comfortable with throwing out random ideas and wasn't and wanted to be led around, when that person came out of their shell and all of a sudden came up with some of the most batshit crazy ideas I've ever heard of, and I'm like, yes, that's amazing. Yes, you can. Yeah. Let's try it. And it's so fun to see that like almost an awakening of a player.
So I try not to think of them as cold fish or shy. What I try to think of them as is this is a different piece of the spectrum for humans. They may never engage like the gregarious ones.
Oh, sure.
But what value can they bring to this? My job as a GM is to find that value. So I've got, everybody's a little different, but in this campaign, Brandle's actually extremely quiet. But the thing, and when we first started, he was newish to D&D, and he was hesitant about like what was the right thing to do. What I did is I tried to identify moments that I thought would work for Brandle, and I tried to emphasize moments that seemed like good character building decisions. So, for example, He rolled a nat 1 and he fired straight into the group. And I rarely use nat 1s for party damage, but I literally had no other choice, and he killed Quentin. And he did this and then immediately was like, I turn invisible. And I was like, yes, that's an amazing moment. And he's continued it.
Well,
He likes that choice.
that's a very honest moment. You know,
Yes, it's very
because
honest. Yeah.
that's a very honest moment because he's obviously has that feeling of guilt or shame or whatever you want to call it, and to be able to immediately react and to put that into the character's shoes is amazing. That's great storytelling.
Well, part of it I honestly believe is building trust with your GM,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, because that player could have been like, I turned invisible, and the GM could have been like, no, don't do that. Or like, no, you can't, or whatever. And maybe the rules support it, maybe they don't, but I did not care about the rules right then.
Sure.
That dude fucking shot his friend and then turned invisible. Yup, I'm in, I'm here for it. So I try to find those moments with them. I have another player on Mondays who's quite quiet, and she comes up with the most amazing ideas. She came up with the cafe that they all met in at the very beginning in our session 0.1, called Dark Side of the Spoon, because it was a coffee shop. She's got an amazing backstory, and I'm obviously obsessed with spoons, so she really got into it. She's got some really interesting character choices. They don't always come out in the game. I think that's actually a failing of mine, if you want to call it a failing, right? That I'm not providing enough content for her to engage with. She doesn't like combat, so I need to find more things that are like puzzle or really animal related. There's another character in that basically collects animals. I haven't given him a lot of opportunities either. That's on me. I don't think that's on them to adapt their play to the game. I think that's on me to adapt the game to their play. And it can be tricky, and you got to have patience on both sides. Fortunately, my characters are very patient with me, my players.
Yeah. Do me a favor real quick. Brandel, you or Wordman, what color hair does Brandel have?
Oh, I think he's got... It does not say.
It doesn't say. Wordman, what color hair does Brandel have?
He's got green eyes. I wonder if it's like almost like he's got gray skin and gray eyes. I wonder if it's like either like a dusty brown, almost not quite sand colored, but like, or whether it's just straight black. Seafoam green. That's not the player. That's another player. Light green, a pale color. Maybe. Let's see what Wordman says. What do you see when Brandel's running around? Beach lichen. That could be interesting. That's again from another player. Tyrion YF says, "How do you know if you're winning at art?" I cannot answer that question, Randall.
How do you know if you're winning at art? This is what I'll say to you. Reactions from other is never gonna be fulfilling for you. You know you're winning at art when you set your pencil or pen or paintbrush or stylus down. When you can set it down and you can walk away. When you can walk away and not feel that stress of, oh, one more mark, or oh, that color is just a little bit off, or it's like it's contentment. That's when you know you're winning at art. The contentment. It may not be the best piece of art you've ever done, but when you finish something, or when you've come to the close of that session and you're content with the work that you've created, that's winning. I mean, contentment is all we could ever ask for. I mean,
yeah.
So never then right up. No, not at all. Because here's the thing: like art in general is so subjective on so many levels. It's impossible to create something and to have the praise or the adoration of everyone that's out there. There's always someone out there that's going to be better than you.
Right. Or at least you think they are. Yeah.
Or at least you as an artist think you are. I mean, there are a million artists out there that I aspire to be like. There are a
Yeah.
ton of artists that I have so much admiration for, and I, you know what, I use them as learning, as learning opportunities. You know, you look at what they've done, and you look at what you do, and you're like, okay, I like what they're doing. It's different than me though. But how can I take what? Oh, okay. Well, the way they position their characters, I could do it more. Do something more like that. I've learned more from just observing other people's work than actually putting pen to paper.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And to artists that are like, but I'm never content. I always have to make a change. I think it's less about you feeling like you have to. It's more about you becoming comfortable with not making a change, with feeling done with it, and that can be a whole other thing. There can be so many things in your life that are that make you want to have control over that drawing to keep making those changes. I think that's important.
The idea of imposter syndrome comes to mind, and how
Yes.
you know what I mean, where you think you're just not good enough. It's not sharp enough. It's not crisp enough. It's not realistic looking enough. If you focus on those things, that literally sucks all the joy out of everything that you're
Yeah.
trying to create. And
Yeah.
it's literally like, for me, I mean, the illustrations that I do, like for example, Brandle here, this is by no means a realistic looking image. You know, this is a very, I mean, it's a very cartoonish, it's a very comic book driven, inspired illustration. You know what I mean? I mean, the way I illustrate and the way I draw things, I'm not, you're just describing my process. Find the joy in what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If like I, for example, again, just looking at me, being able to sit down and take your players' characters and give
Hmm.
them a little bit of a breath of life, and on the
Hmm.
paper, that sparks joy for me. Okay,
Yes.
that helps.
Yeah.
It helps to tell stories. So
Yeah.
whether I'm writing my children's books, whether or not
Hmm.
I'm DMing a game for friends or for people online, whether or not I'm illustrating characters of someone else's, I'm helping in some way, or I'm in one way or another, I'm telling a story. And
Yeah.
that's just so much fun, and that brings contentment, that brings fulfillment. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just, don't don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Enjoy what you're
Yeah.
creating. I mean,
Yeah. I think that's that. I mean, it seems simple, and I know it's a little more complicated than that. But yeah, have fun doing what you're doing. That's how you win. I say that about D&D. Like people are like, how do win D&D? It's like you don't win it. You win it
yeah.
if you're having fun. If you're playing the game that you're having the most fun at, then you're winning. If you're not having fun, then maybe find another game or make a change to make it more fun.
You know what? I could kind of see his hair. I could kind of see his hair actually in like a darker brown, but then have like the bleached tips, like sun bleached tips at the
Yeah.
ends. You know what I mean? Like he's been
Could they
in.
be instead of sun bleach tips? Could they be like the green of like almost moss at the tips?
Sure. Here, let's try a couple things here. Let's have some fun. And while we're talking about it, let's.
Birdman is in a very different time zone, so he doesn't always respond right away.
It's no worries. No worries at all. Let's do this.
Yeah,
Let's.
surfer hair. Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the vibe I got when you started describing him, and you started talking about like the
The beach
fisherman
ball.
shorts and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is
He
this is a beach dweller. Okay.
Oh, there's another player. This is Harlech, a random guy. He says driftwood. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Driftwood with moss on it, maybe. For hair effect. I don't know. I am very bad at drawing. I have such respect for people that can draw stuff.
So do I. And I still do, and that's how I mean, I went to art school, and in art school, there were people that were in art school with me that didn't have, like, when we started the semester, didn't have a lick of talent. I mean, you looking at the stuff that they created, um, they just they, like they weren't creating masterpieces. Neither was I, but it is a learned uh, uh, it is a learned form of creation. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
there are absolutely steps and tools that you pick up and you learn along the way that help you improve.
Mhm.
Looking at things in the scope of form, looking at shapes instead of just like the whole. You know what I mean? Like these like the furbolg's ears are almost cylinders, and being able to
Mhm.
see that and then being able to kind of draw that out. You know, you learn that in the first couple of like art classes.
Right.
You know, and then you build on that, and you go the people that at the beginning of that first semester that I was like, man, why are they here? They turned out to be amazing artists because they had the drive, because they had the passion for it, and because they put in the work to create things. And when I say they were amazing artists, again, maybe they weren't the greatest technical artist, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But what
Yeah.
they created spoke to me,
Yeah.
and had a feeling to it that that reached out and that made me feel something when I experienced it. Um,
Yeah.
so and in trying to pull things back into what we're supposed to be talking about. Um,
I don't
with
mind talking about this.
with
Yeah.
D&D, it's a lot of the same thing. It's the more you do it, the
Yes.
more you enjoy it, the more you learn, and the more fun you have, the more open you become to different things, different experiences. How many guidelines? What kind of guidelines do you put on your players when you sit down to make up characters? What do
I
you
tell
go ahead?
Yeah, I tell them that I want to tell a good story, and so if they have a good idea for a story that we can use, that's what I want. I tell them if they can't think of a good story, but they can at least pick one thing, we'll build off of that. Um, it really depends on who I've got, who I've been playing with. I don't really put limits on it. I do ask people not to min max, but other than that, if it's written down somewhere, we'll try and use it. If it's unbalanced, we'll have a conversation about how it's unbalanced. I've had some players use UA stuff, which I cannot remember what that stands for.
Unearthed Arcana.
Unearthed Arcana. There we go. And it was a little unbalanced, and so we adjusted.
Okay,
We just agree on that at the beginning.
sure.
I've got a player, the Loxodon actually, Druge. He's got a reach of like 10 feet.
Yeah.
It's hard to knock him down, stuff like that. I chucked ghouls or something at him, and he almost died because they sucked his strength. Like it was so it you find what works with those characters. I think that's more important. Druge has a fascinating backstory, and his character play is very interesting. The way that he reacts to stuff, and the way not just the fighting, but like his character interactions are really interesting. So it kind of stems from whatever is interesting. I think
Okay.
I'm I had a player who oh, actually Tyler's in chat, had a warlock, and they were like, "How do you feel about patrons?" And I was like, "Well, I've played with warlocks that don't pay attention to their patrons, and that's fine. And I've played with warlocks that have deep feelings about their patrons and want them involved. What do you want to do?" And we created a really interesting patron type that's a little whimsically weird, and we're using it in the game. It's very interesting. And whenever it comes up to the patron or I have an idea about it, I ask the player, like, "Hey, do you think your patron would do this?" And slowly, this player and I are finding what this patron looks like. It's not going to look like your traditional D&D patron. It's going to be what we come up with. It's going to be very interesting.
I I read something on Reddit the other day that I thought was the
Mm-hmm.
funnest idea for a warlock ever. I'd
Oh
never
yeah.
seen this before. It's probably been done 1,000 times. I'd never seen it before. I'd never heard of it before, but I loved it. The idea was
Mm-hmm.
that the warlock's patron was the DM,
Oh, interesting.
and I sat for a second and I just thought about that, and I was like, oh, that's so fourth wall breaking. I love it.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
It
I hadn't
was
thought of
like it
that.
was so goofy because it's like the DM. If you really think about it, the DM is the creator of that universe.
Well, yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I
that's
mean? And so
very.
they have all encompassing power. They are omnipresent.
Hmm.
They are the ones that have their fingers in all the pies. They know what's happening on every continent, in every city, in every home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like it's just everywhere all at once. And so the fact, like, it's
I haven't
breaking.
thought of that.
It's OP.
Yeah, that's
It
a really
can be a
interesting
little bit
idea.
OP,
It depends on the GM.
depending on
Yeah.
the GM and how they play it. But I was like, oh, that's such a fun idea.
It's a really fun idea. And I mean, I guess you can sort of go to the side of the board where it's like, well, technically every patron is the GM, but I think
True,
yeah, that's
true.
sort of leaning into it a little bit more.
But I mean,
That's really interesting.
and what was really fun to me about that idea was that, um, maybe the player had a specific name for the patron, right? And it wasn't necessarily that it would, he didn't necessarily use the DM's name or anything like that, but the players didn't know that the patron was itself the dungeon master. You know what I mean? I mean, and again,
Yeah.
it goes exactly into every GM is the patron, but
No, yeah. It's interesting. The mistress character that I came up with it could
that
have been that, but I actually traded the character concept and some of the defining moments to a level up dice employee to get one of their named cog.
okay.
And so she helped me create the mistress and like the aesthetic and things like that. And I run it and I keep her posted on what I do with it. But it's really flavored from that human that I know. I try to flavor it that flavor, like what the kind of stuff that I know that she likes and things. And it's kind of interesting.
I'm gonna get a little bit of this green in there, and we're gonna see how this looks when I blend it in. It could look really gross.
I
We're
like
gonna,
that brown. I
we're
don't
gonna
know
have
that we might love it if it looks gross. We'll see.
we might I don't know what's gonna happen yet, but we're gonna have fun trying it.
Actually, I kind of like that. That's kind of neat.
We're gonna have some fun here. Um,
That's kind of neat. I like it. Yeah,
just
that's cool.
just down at the very bottom of the beard too,
Yep.
for sure.
I think the art will help solidify some things for people too. We're using generic token art, and I think we're at a place where, yeah, I really like that in the beard. I think we're at a place where having the character art, up there on the stream while we're playing. Those are the tokens we use. Those are the tokens that were, under above where the captions are. I think it'll be helpful. I've noticed in Broken Bait it's helpful for me when I look at the like you drew
The storm cleric or
Storm
the
Cleric.
yeah.
Yeah, Freya. Uh, Freya winning battle. Yeah, you drew Freya in battle. Freya is really interesting because you drew her with sparks coming out of her hair, and it's become a character thing. There's no I don't know if there's mechanics for it, but there's a definite like character moment where she was she was doing a concentration spell the other day, and I was like, do you think there would be like little blue sparks coming out of your hair? And she was like, yes, and it comes up a lot. And I don't know that we would consistently think of that if we didn't have that picture. It's perfect. And Battle immediately wanted her companions drawn because that was really important, and that turtle that you drew definitely defines that damn turtle. So it's
That I'm sorry, that little turtle's got to be like that
the
has
cutest thing.
it is,
Yeah.
but it's a little mood breaking.
It's I
It's a little
started
distracting.
I started using the deck of wonder whenever somebody rolls a natural 7,
Okay, a
and then
natural
I draw a
7.
random 7 spoon.
Oh,
Seven.
of course. Okay.
And it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, and one of the cards is like a turtle appears, and I didn't expect her to be like, "This is mine now," and I want to know what all the stats are, and I want her to be able to like pick locks and stuff, but she did, and we, those are character choices we had to talk about and work in. So she carries the turtle around. The dog does, We were in another place. She is a ranger, so having an animal companion makes sense. We were somewhere else. It was working farm that trained working dogs, and so some of them would go to be cattle dogs. I was working in service dogs, and the player was like, "Please give me a dog. Please give me a dog. Please give me a dog. Please give me." And I was like, "All right." So we gave her a dog.
For
So
anyone
that's kind of where that came from.
wondering, this is what she's talking about.
What's up?
I brought up the picture. For anyone wondering, this is what we're talking about. It is absolutely a turtle and a baby Bjorn.
Yeah. It's actually based on my actual service dog as well.
Yes.
The dog looks like Tara. Yeah.
But
And I don't know where she
face.
found that picture of that turtle, but that's the face we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
They actually have tokens that go on the map. I have
Yep.
to move them around.
Yep.
Oh,
sorry.
But that's a player choice.
Yep.
She wanted to do that. It was my job as a GM to make it work, and I'm doing it.
That's the kind of player stuff that I love, though. The stuff that it's a little bit out of left field, but it's so. That's definitely what's the word I'm looking for? It's very specific to a character. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's very I don't know. It just builds. It just builds that kind of mythos in the game. It's like there's a character that does this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it works for her. She's definitely building. And Luth said, "That's not mood breaking. That's mood setting for Broken Bane." He's right. That's definitely the mood of that group. The warlock shoots instead of Eldritch Blast, it's like a sunshine blast. It's a very interesting game.
Very distracting turtle.
They tried to adopt there was a mimic that looked like a jewelry box. In my mind, mimics are everyday items that actually try to bite you. And so it was a jewelry box, and it had like jewels for teeth and things. And they were trying to figure out what to feed it to make it stop attacking them so that they could adopt it. But unfortunately, it had bitten the furbog in that game on the butt, and she destroyed it. But they tried really hard to adopt it. And I was like, please kill it, because I'm going to have to ask Randall to draw a mimic that looks like a jewelry box, and we're going too far. So yeah, that might have to be a recurring theme, because it worked really well. The tongue was the satin lining that you find in jewelry boxes, and it made like jangly music box noises, and it skittered around on jewelry box feet, and it glittered, and it was very creepy.
Okay. Before I get too busy in like really completing some of the artwork for this guy, do we want to move on and start drawing someone else?
Sure. I do really like what you're doing with him, though. Yeah. Let's see. I have mentioned Druge a bunch and Quentin a bunch. So do you want to draw a Loxodon or an elf with very complicated braids?
Oh, gosh.
Right.
Those are my choices.
Well, there's also a halfling and an Aasimar, and actually, there is a human. I think there's a human wizard. He's got a very big hat, and he looks very fancy.
He's very fancy. All right. Okay. Well, we'll put Brandel on hold for now, and we'll move on to someone else.
Luth wants Druge. We're getting a vote for Druge.
Druge.
He's got tusks that have runes that glow.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. He has Let me see what he described.
This guy, like these are just headshots, so you're not gonna get all the fun stuff. But I can't wait to draw the whole thing of this guy.
I know.
Not as run as a mammoth. This is fun.
I like that he's
specified
African elephant large ears. That's really interesting.
African elephant large ears.
Yeah, because the Asian elephants have smaller ears.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which I know because I'm a weirdo. He said closer to mammoth than elephant, so that's kind of interesting.
Are we talking hairy like mammoth? Like is he a hairy elephant, or is he like a leathery elephant?
I don't know. I think Tech's in the chat.
He was. What do we think?
Tech, he's never given me the impression that he's furry, so See if he responds.
Okay, hold on. I gotta do my due diligence here, and I gotta look up a little bit of reference art here.
Makes sense.
African elephant.
Mm-hmm.
And hold on, I'm gonna put head, just because I wanna get as much of
Very
the
specific.
structure, like the bone structure and stuff like that, correct.
He said the mammoth versus elephant was more about the tusk curve. So
Oh, okay,
I think we're looking at the leathery type of
okay,
elephant. Yeah.
okay. But the
Now I'm gonna have to look
mammoths
up.
had like didn't they? Like the big
They
long tusks.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking up right now.
Like African
Yeah,
elephants are like the
mammoths have the big like
swooping.
looped up tusks.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
big
swooping
swooping
up
one. Okay,
tusks as opposed to
good.
elephants that are more straight, I think. I mean, they're curved, but they're more straight out. The mammoths go up. Yeah. Elephants go down and out, but mammoths go up almost to their crown. We think. Since all we do is find tusks. Yeah, very cool. Druge is a really fun character because that player came to me with a really intricate backstory that he actually linked with another player who also had a very interesting backstory. And so they came to the game with a linked backstory, but they didn't fill in all the details. But he's using his the backstory that we've defined and we've like agreed on, and even some stuff we haven't agreed on, and used it to inform his character interactions. And again, it's all a negotiation, right? Like if I'm like, nah, that's too much. I haven't had to do that yet, but if I was like, nah, that's too much, then I would reach out. And whenever he's doing like level ups and stuff, he'll be like, I'm gonna do this, and that means these things. Because the player playing Druge is a rules scholar, and I specifically refer to him as a rules scholar instead of a rules lawyer, because rules lawyers have sort of a bad reputation for being annoying, and TechSoup is anything but annoying. He's very polite. He will very politely and with absolutely zero attitude be like, "Would you like me to tell you how that's supposed to go?" And I will say, "Yes, please," or I'll say, "No, I'm just going to make something up." And
That's perfect.
and I'll. It's amazing. Or I'll be like, Tech, I don't know. Or somebody be like,
The
how does
most
that work? And I'm like, I don't know.
non-confrontational way ever. I love it.
Sometimes he'll tell me how it works, and I'll be like, I don't want to do that. And he doesn't get mad. It's awesome. He's the best.
That doesn't seem right to how I feel about it, but
right, yeah, he's pretty chill. So he'll when he levels up, he makes these level up choices, not fully on min-maxing, although he's perfectly capable of doing that. He tries to make them based on the character, but he still talks to me about it so that we can sort of negotiate to make sure that it's going to work within the world and stuff. We haven't run into any problems yet, but it's very interesting. Yeah, he's got a huge reach. Just so, and he works with a glaive, and he's got like double attacks and stuff. And you can absolutely build OP characters, but because I have absolute control of the world, that thing just has more health, or it can hit you harder, or whatever. You know, you make. And I'm learning more about how to do that. I've been reading up on some books around like monster combat and that kind of thing, which I found a book that basically is sort of a storytelling version of that. And it's kind of interesting. You know, you don't just add like 15 more jackals. Maybe one of the jackals is undead, or maybe this one somehow has lightning powers or whatever. And the jackals know how to defend their territory, so they have advantages on these things. And it's not just reading stat blocks. And I find it really, really interesting when the players do the same thing. They don't just read their character stat blocks, but they have like a reason that their character has a 10-foot reach. Why? Why does he have a 10-foot reach? You know? And sometimes you can get players to engage with you that way. They give you a character sheet and you're like, neat. Why does he use a longbow instead of a sword? Why? Is it because he likes, his father took him hunting when he was a kid? Is it because he really likes, he's an archery, target great thingness? Is it because he's never found a longsword that's balanced correctly for him? Asking those kinds of questions can help people sort of settle into their characters. It can also get you bards with bagpipes if you ask questions like that. So
Oh.
yeah,
But you know what though? I'm
yeah.
okay. I'm okay with bagpipes though. I'm okay with the bard with bagpipes. I enjoy bards of all shapes and sizes. Um, I've actually, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I've not drawn too many elephants in my time.
I I like what you're doing. I have a lot of art of elephants, and this is definitely ticking all my elephant boxes. I am slightly obsessed with them. It's a very strange.
It's a strange relationship.
I follow this group on Instagram that rescues orphan elephants. One of the first gifts my now husband ever gave me was a knitting bag with elephants on it. Yeah, they're just neat creatures.
Absolutely. No, I think elephants are amazing, and I'm very very sad at the state of which some species of elephants are rapidly disappearing.
Yeah, that's not great.
Okay, what I want to know, what class is Druge?
He's hang on, let me look at his character sheet so because some of it's a secret. So give me just give me one quick second. Apparently to
I'm just
find.
looking for a couple little things to kind of maybe because it's just a headshot. I want to try and give as
Mhm.
much character information as I can into that one little circle. Um,
Drew is a barbarian.
okay.
So he's big. He's a frontliner. He's always in the front. Um, he's usually leading. He's a tank. He can take a lot of damage. And I wouldn't call him aggressive. I wouldn't say that he starts the fight, but he definitely finishes them.
Okay.
But there should be a bit of mystical around it because some of his other stuff, like the glowy runes, comes from something else. So there's a bit of. I think of it more as magic is too flashy. It's like
It's a spiritual thing.
it's more like an earth magic kind of thing. Like
It's not
it's
it's not religious as in like cleric magic. It's
no, it's
spiritual in that it's like spirit animal like one with the
yeah,
land kind of
yes, like
like spirit of
yeah,
the ancestors kind of thing.
yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Totally get
it's
it.
has some very interesting mechanics that come with it. But yeah, I really like the way that it shows up on the tusks. We talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about what he does with his trunk. So I like that you've made the trunk active because he uses his trunk a lot in gameplay. And I like that the tusks are so visible because he uses those quite a lot too. Like it shows up in combat and it shows up on the street too. And he's done a really interesting job with how he's built it into the character because it wasn't always there. It's shown up and he's not like thrilled with it. He plays with like he's a little uncomfortable with it as a character and for reasons he hasn't revealed to the party. And it grows. Like the runes are doing more interesting things. They do different colors, which is very fascinating. He also likes the eyes to be a deep gray sclera, darker than his skin, and then orange irises that slowly transition to yellow the closer it gets to the pupil, which I think is really interesting because he notes here that the pupil is typically black, and he wants it to be that different color. I think that's going to give a really interesting appearance to his eyes.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I just
Okay,
it's gonna
okay, so it's like I'm gonna do a new layer here real quick. So say we have, you know, skin is there, so like darker, and then orange.
I'm waiting for the
Oh, I'm sorry. You
yeah
gotta. Sorry about that.
catching up. That's
Okay.
okay. Yeah, so I see that now. Yeah, I think that makes
I mean, this is
I
just
think that's
grabbing random colors real quick, but this is kind of the feel you're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. I think
That's
that's what he was
interesting.
saying,
Interesting.
right?
All right,
Yeah,
that'll be
and
fun.
instead of a black people, it's supposed to be yellow.
Oh, I'm sorry,
So
yellow.
it almost looks like it. The way that I see this, when I'm seeing this, is it almost looks like a like the opposite of a pool of darkness. It's like a brightness that's I find very interesting. He said, "Yep, that's it." So you got it right.
Okay, cool. Okay, here's a question. Any kind of oh gosh, I should really. He's got to have at least some part of his. I don't know how much of this we're actually be able to fit into a circle. It's gonna be smaller. Um, equipment, shirt, male.
Oh, he's wearing.
Is it or is he just bare chested with belts?
No, he is
Simple brown leather cuirass.
very
Okay.
worn and aged. Cuts off at the shoulders with no sleeves. I think he has silver chain, technically, silver like necklaces wrapped around his tusks, but I think he would rather have the
Have the
runes visible.
yeah.
Yeah, I think those are more story choice, character choice.
This is gonna be a lot. This character is gonna be a lot of fun to draw.
Yeah. I would love to see a full version of this guy.
You can, Shauna. We already
No,
talked
I'm
about that.
gonna give you all of my money. I swear to God, I love your art so badly. I wanna um Can I keep part of what we were chatting about sort of a
Sure,
secret
absolutely,
because I want to
absolutely,
surprise my players? Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, the chains did get sold off. Yeah. Okay. So right call on the runes. Yeah, characters. I find characters really interesting because they can sometimes be a way to express something that you don't have familiarity with. So I've known quiet players to play something sort of gregarious. I've known people who consider themselves sort of loud and out there to try to play something quieter.
Mm-hmm.
I've known, in different variations on that.
Sure.
I've known people that want to try out, like, um, that example just completely evaporated from my mind. That's so good. Yeah, so you can try different things out, which I think is really interesting because it's a low risk environment. If you want to try out being a jokester and you're terrible at telling jokes, it's not
That's
gonna make you
what.
a social, you know.
This is what I love about D&D. For just to put this out there, it's such a great opportunity for people to not only just expand what they know about theater or improv or storytelling or anything like that. It's absolutely an opportunity to explore different personas and to see different
Yeah.
personality types and say, hey, I've always been kind of shy or I've always been a very gregarious person. Maybe I should try. Let's bring it back for this game. Let's see what happens. It I I've always said. I've always said that teaching kids is a great thing. Teaching kids how to play D&D is a great thing because it teaches soft skills like
Yeah.
cooperation, empathy, being
Yeah.
working, team building, that kind of thing. It's just these soft skills that you need your entire life.
Oh yeah.
And that's absolutely why I wrote the books that I did. It's because it's just a good way to
So
introduce
good.
kids to this pastime that's just so much fun. But they get so much
Yeah.
more out of it than you think. But adults do
Can, yeah.
too. Adults do
Yeah.
too. Like
Yeah.
it's a different. It can be a different thing. Like with adults, instead of it being all about the soft skills and stuff, it's a self introspective kind of thing. You
It
can
can be, yeah.
really it really can be, and I love that.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, as I've said, I'm autistic. I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. I did not have great social skills when I first started sort of behavioral therapy and stuff. And I wish to all that is shiny that somebody had introduced me to D&D sooner. because it's definitely helped. The psychiatrist that diagnosed me with autism insisted I hang out with specific size groups of people. And the only way I could figure out to do the larger group was to do board games, because people would come to my house. They would play the board game that I invited them over to play, and it had rules wrapped up in the game. And then when the game was done, they would leave. But through that, I learned social skills. I learned how to welcome people into my home. I learned how to take turns better. I learned how to, small talk is stupid. I learned how to do that. I learned how to pacing. I learned a lot of things about conversational pacing from it. I think it's really valuable to play games because you're in a low risk environment. There's a couple of groups that I love, like Game to Grow. I'm their volunteer coordinator. I just started learning about a group called Role Play Lead, I think is what they're called, that do this kind of work. There's a group called Star that does it too, and I think it's a lot easy. It's a lot better way of engaging children in those soft skills, whether they need help with social skills or not, without being like, and this is how you treat your friend.
Yeah.
This is how you open a door. This is how you say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Like, that's kind of what I was raised as in a military family, where it's like, this is how you respond in these exact situations. But what happens when you're outside of those exact situations?
Sure.
So the game D&D gives you that opportunity to learn how to improv in real life, because, spoiler alert, real life is just improv, which is the worst. I'm terrible at it.
No, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, dealing with any and all, to be honest, small talk is stupid. Thank you, Wandering Shrink.
It is. Yeah.
It's life is great. Like all the little moments that pop up that you don't expect. And being a father of 3 children, I have many of those moments now.
I bet you do. Yeah.
Many moments now where I was like, I was not expecting that to happen. Okay, and trying to remember the yes and or the no but with kids is
Yes.
improv all itself.
Very important. I actually learned a lot of management skills from it. So I'm a manager at a tech company, and use most of my management skills comes from being a stage manager for theater and running games. Like, I've had people put, I caught somebody at this the other day. I was looking at a resume, and they, you see it online, but I'd never seen it on a resume. But on their resume, in special skills, they'd listed, I work with a group around conflict resolution every week. And we work on planning skills.
Yep.
And like all that. And I was like, dude, do you play D&D? And they were like,
Yep.
yes. How did you know that? And I was like, on your resume. And they were like, oh, you caught me. And I was like, no, it's amazing. I was super excited. Because it is a valuable skill set.
It's what it is. It absolutely is. You're right. I mean, a lot of people just think, oh, it's just a silly game. Oh, it's dwarves and elves and blah blah blah. But those are just the pieces. The game as a whole is so much deeper and so much more than just that.
Yes, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Is like, I don't want to play an elf shooting at a dwarf. It's like, well, you can't play that way, or you can play a really interesting character that happens to be an elf and is super snarky all the time, and it gets them into trouble a lot. Like it. What would that do? Well, I'm not a snarky person. No, play a snarky person. See what happens. Well, I'm not a really.
Have you ever won?
Yeah. It's really tough finding a face for most games, like the people that starts the conversations. And I'm always fascinated by who it ends up being, because it's not always the bard. Well, yeah, bard. It's not always the bard. Sometimes it's the ranger who is very quiet, but they end up starting those conversations the most. I find that really interesting because you're looking straight at character interactions, right? You have a group of people, and they walk into a bar, and they have to go talk to the bartender. But do they all scoot over to the bar as a group?
Nope.
Or does one of them say, grab a table, I'll be right back, I'll bring us, who intercepts that person? Like, you can set up all these really interesting social situations, which I find fascinating. Like, there was a situation where there was a murder, but there was a murder by a guy who had stolen his son's soul and was like sharing his son's soul. But it wasn't. I'm trying to remember what I've told the players. The son wasn't actually a son; it was like an embodiment of his soul. It was very weird and interesting, and that came from character interactions. I actually made up a lot of that, like on the. I didn't make that up on the spot, but a lot of the minor stuff I made up on the spot, like the kids' reaction to that and stuff, was based on how the players were reacting to the situation.
Sure.
So it can really inform gameplay how the players will react. One of the players was like, I put more druids in because he's technically a druid, but he was like, I want to be a druid that isn't all about the hippy dippy nonsense. And I was like, cool. So I made druids that were about the hippy dippy nonsense so that he could react to them, and it was awesome because he hated it.
This is the nonsense I specifically said.
Yeah, but then like another player liked goats, so I specifically included a herd of goats somewhere. Another player is covered in metal, so I set up an adventure where they had to deal with the Fae, and the Fae don't like metal, so he had to take all of his metal off. Like you set up these different interactions just to honestly kind of see how they'll react, which is kind of fun. Yeah, Luce, who's the druid in question, said the character hated it, the player loved it. It's funny how often that shows up, where the character's mad and upset about something, but the player's like, I'm good. This is fun for me.
Yeah.
This happens a lot with one of my players. The character will be like, I hate this. I want to get out. I hate you suck. Like, I hate it. I'll check in with the player and be like, we're good. And I'd be like, I'm having so much fun. It's like, great. When the two players were literally murdering each other, I checked in with both of them afterward to be like, we good? And they were like, we're having so much fun. And I was like, okay. So it's interesting when the players do that. I actually had a player come to me once and they were like, so my character's really happy, but I realized I don't like this. Can we change it? And I was like, yeah. What about it don't you like? What made you realize you didn't like it? We worked on it. We realized what it was, and that doesn't come up anymore, because it's about the player's enjoyment. It's about being able to tell a good story. That means the player has to be having fun. That means the character needs to be fitting in, so.
Sure. It's
oh, this is looking really
good. It's amazing how, and I say this from experience as well. There have been times when the GM is so wrapped up in his own plan and his own world and his own game that he doesn't that he or she may not realize that what's happening is not necessarily conducive to a safe space for their players. When you start a game, do you talk to your players about, okay, what are we comfortable with? What do we need?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We do session zeros whenever I start a game. I actually modeled one on my stream. The session zeros for me are about a couple of things. One, it's about figuring out how the players are going to get to know each other. You can all have them meet in a bar for the same job, or another part of it is solidifying the characters a little bit more. A lot of people come to that table with session zero and they know they want to play a tabaxi, but they don't know what they're going to do. I showed up to session zero like that when I built this character, this tabaxi that you drew for me, whom I love. I didn't even know what class she was going to be for a while. And then a big part of it for me, before the session zero, I reach out to all the players and I explain a yes-no list to them. And I ask them for submissions to the yes-no list. And then I explain that we'll be using Discord. And I want them to use Discord if at any point they're uncomfortable. I think this is especially important in stream. I really like the idea of X cards, where if somebody's, like they don't want to go down that road, they're uncomfortable with the situation, they hold up an X card and we take a break. I really like that idea, but I try to protect my players on stream so they don't have to reveal that vulnerability.
Oh, sure.
But if they want to, they can be like, I don't like this, or if they want to keep it private, what they'll do is they'll ping me on Discord and I'll be like, hey, okay, we're going to take a quick break. I got to take the dogs out. I do have to take the dogs out regularly. I do have to use the restroom on my own. But sometimes it's just taking a break to check in with that player,
Sure.
you know? So I always explain that ahead of time. I always get them to give me a yes/no list. The yes part of the list is like, what do you want to see in this? So a good example of that is I want to see queens instead of kings. Great. A no list is the other side of that is like, what do you specifically not want to see in this game? So a good example of that is like, well, I don't want to play with sexual assault. It's like, great. I include some of my yes nos. That's one of my yeses and one of my nos. And then I anonymize it by mixing it all together. And then in the session 0, I go through it. I say, does anybody want to add anything or take, anything doesn't feel right? So a lot of times they'll say the same things, and I'll squish it into one. So it's anonymous. And I'll say, okay, if this is good, if you have things you want to add to it later, let me know. But if this is good, we're all in agreement. Yes, okay. And we move forward with that game. And then the Discord channel is a way to tweak it as we go. And then the other thing that I do is I check in with them regularly. So we just had a long break. We're going to check in at the beginning of the next time we stream, and I'm going to be like, all right, this is a mini session 0. This is our yes no list. Are we feeling comfortable with this? Do we want to add anything?
What's fascinating to me? That's amazing and incredibly supportive and incredibly in tune with your players that you do that for them. What's amazing to me is, like, I've been playing games for, 25 years. I mean, a long time or more. And maybe it's because the people that I play with on a regular basis are people that I've known for a long time, and we're in tune with each other, and we know those turn-ons and turn-offs. But I've never had, outside of conventions and outside of more recent games that I've done online, I don't think I've ever had that conversation with a group of players. And it's not to say that I'm not concerned about what they're comfortable with. A lot of the things that people would immediately say, no, I don't want that as part of the game. I just assume that that's not something we should have in the game. You know what I mean? Like, it's and that's not to belittle anyone for wanting to have that be a strong point. Absolutely not. If there are things that you're uncomfortable with, you make it known. Absolutely. It's just like, and again, maybe this is because I'm an old white guy now. But I've been doing this game for a long time, and I'd never had that conversation until the last maybe year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. In no way do I think it's detrimental to the game. I think it's nothing but beneficial. I just think it's interesting.
It's an interesting point that you've brought up, but I think in the last couple of years, there are more cultures getting involved in the game.
Sure.
And for better or for worse, that, the people that used to play this, 10, 20 years ago were white dudes. Yeah. When you get women involved, dudes making jokes about, bits and pieces are not funny to some girls, and some girls think it's hilarious, but some girls don't. You can't generalize that kind of thing. Sure. One of the things that I won't deal with in my game because I don't feel qualified, I'm learning. One day I will feel, better, maybe, is I won't deal with racism in my game. People are evil for evil's sake, and they're villains for villain's sake, but they're not, I'm not having like all of the dwarves hate the orcs. I don't do that in my game because I don't feel qualified to handle it well. I make that really clear up front. And I have had players be like, I want you to be able to handle this. And I have said, I've gone back to them and been like, I hear you. I'm working on it, but I don't feel like I can play that game well. I know people that do. I know people that specifically run games based around those kinds of concepts so that they can introduce their sometimes this is with teens or kids, introduce them to those concepts so they can see what it plays out like in the real world. I just don't think I can do that justice, so I don't include it. That does not mean that everybody in my world is white or anything like that. It just means that I don't deal with racism concepts. I think that that is definitely something I do because I feel very conscious of that culture. I just don't know enough about it. And I do the same thing with like tribal stuff. If a player wants to bring it in, I tend to do a lot of research as much as I can. But different kinds of cultures, unless they're completely fantasy, if they're based on a real life culture in the real world, I tend to do a lot of research on it because I want to make sure that we're all in a good place. and I talk to my players about things that they frankly, Randall, this has a lot to do with theory of mind. I am very, very, very positive that I cannot read your mind. And I'm also convinced I do not know everything. I will someday, but today I don't. So, to that end, I have to ask people to confirm for
Sure.
me what might be an assumption. And I do it whenever I have the opportunity because there's so often where I don't have the opportunity and I'm making those assumptions anyway. So,
Let me ask this real quick. Do we have any kind of war paint or anything like that? Tattoos? Anything?
no, I think they are just the runes.
Scars? Battle damage? Big,
No, I
huge,
think he's.
fun earrings and those gigantic ears? Anything like that? Is Tex still here?
We haven't discussed that, I don't believe.
Tex Soup, what do you think? What do you think? Should there be some kind of earring, or should there be battle scars? Should there be paint? Should there be
Druge
tattoos on Druge?
comes from a tribal sort of background. Like it's family clan I think would probably be closer. So I can see there being some of that, but he hasn't called
Some
that
kind of
out
tribal
that I
markings.
remember.
Okay.
Yeah, Luth is pinging him. We'll see if he. Let me dig through his. This is the other neat thing about Discord is we can have these kinds of conversations and I can keep them. You know,
Yeah.
I can dig through this channel from the over the year that we've been playing and see like what kind of things does he has he described, you know. Let's see here, I think Luth actually drew Druge at one point. Runes, right. Oh, tusk swords. He does have swords that fit on his tusks, which I think is hilarious. I don't actually know what those look like now that I think about it.
The runes I'm going to do actually in a different layer. I'm not going to actually draw them so you can physically see them.
Sure.
But the color.
He says there's probably some remnant of war paint towards the top of the trunk. Do you mean the tip of the nose or where it meets the
Or
bridge
by
of
the,
his?
yeah, like the bridge of, like in between his eyes. But none that anyone has seen yet. Okay. Like, do you want to have like war paint like up towards like where the note where the trunk meets the eyes and it's like been rubbed back kind of thing? Because I can have some fun with that. Like, let's merge those.
He says there are scars, but none that anyone has seen yet.
Between the
That's
eyes. Okay. Okay.
yeah,
So what I'll
yeah,
do
between the
then,
eyes.
okay.
So I don't think there's any scars on his face necessarily.
Okay. I kind of want to do that on a separate layer also. Just because I think I think it'll turn out, it'll look really cool. But he's looking kind of. I ain't gonna lie, I think he's looking pretty badass.
I like him. Yeah, this is definitely close to what I see when he's about to charge somebody. Yeah, he is resting grumpy face in my mind as well, so this fits well.
Resting
But
grumpy face.
he's oddly gentle. Like there's the Asimar that's in this. She was I think she was upset at one point, and he just sort of reached over with his trunk, and they like held hands, but she was holding his trunk. It was super cute. At the end of each session, I try to get the players to nominate good character moments, and I collect them, and then they vote on which one is the best for that session, and then that player gets an opportunity to re-roll a d20, any d20 they want the next game. The reason I do it isn't for the advantage on a roll. The reason I do it is because I find it a really interesting way to capture what the players got out of that session.
Sure.
You know, and it highlights some of the role playing moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great way to gauge that. Yeah.
I know that some GMs will do check-in and check-out questions. I used to do check-in questions. That didn't work super well for most of my groups. And instead of the check-out question, I ask about the player character moments. There's a lot of value in check-in and check-out questions, like figuring out a way to like get yourself into the game, like transition from I am a human that has a job to I am a loxodon that murders things with my tusks is sometimes a tough transition. I haven't worked that out yet.
Sure.
What I normally do is I just talk about what we did last time and this is where you are now and let's go. So
Yeah. I tell you what, Shawna Spain, we've been going for about an hour and a half. And this has been a lot of fun, and I've been really enjoying working on these
yeah, I really
characters with
appreciate
you.
it. It's fun.
So I'm excited to finish up all 6 of them for you and get those off to you so you
Yeah.
can use them for your game. What I might do is I might continue working on these on my own streams. But thank you. I want to say right now, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me on Drawing Conclusions, because this is a lot of
Oh,
fun.
sure.
It's been a
This
lot of
was a
fun
lot of
talking
fun.
to you about a few different things. It's been a lot of fun talking to you about how you talk with your players, how you do your character creation, how you build them into your game. It's you sitting and talking with you has been absolutely enlightening, because you've shown the sensitivity that DMs should have with their players, and I for one very much appreciate that. And that's something that I hope to one day, that I strive to be better at. Anytime I'm gaming, I always try to make sure my players have fun, but I always want them to feel safe, and I always want them to come back.
Yeah.
And I think you've shown us that you do an absolutely amazing job with your players. So thank you so much for that.
I appreciate that. I'm not perfect.
Nobody
This
is.
has come through a lifetime of learning. I'm still learning. I have absolutely made mistakes, but it is my goal to make sure that my players feel safe and they want to come back. And I'm glad that that came across, and I'm glad that you had fun. I have so much respect for people like you that do what you do, and it has been absolutely thrilling for me to watch you draw this stuff. I love watching your drawing streams, and for you to be drawing these players characters that I play with every week has just been just an absolute thrill. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me again. Why don't you tell everyone that's hanging out with us and that's going to be watching the VODs, where can they find you?
Well, I have a Twitch channel that you can find under like 7spoon. I'm very talkative on Twitter, so you can also find me there. We have a Saturday stream this week for Broken Bane. We'll be getting back into they're just about to break into the last train cab, so come join us for that. That should be fun. And then we'll be back with Treasure Tuesday next Tuesday, I believe. And then our usual schedule is Tuesday, Saturday, and then we'll be back with our I think our next Sunday stream around Brunches and Dragons around sort of a storytelling experiment is going to be actually with the Opera Geeks. So that should be fun. So keep an eye out for a notice around that. And if you follow me on Twitter, I tweet about all the stuff I do, and that's kind of the easiest way to follow.
Fantastic. For those of you that don't know, my name is Randall Hampton. You can find me on Twitter at Randall_Hampton. I'm the author and illustrator of the Little Game Master series of children's books, where Dr. Seuss meets Dungeons and Dragons. You can find me here on Twitch, Randall_Hampton. Basically everywhere it's Randall_Hampton. It's the easiest name to find. Find me, shout at me, holler at me. If you like what I do, if you don't, whatever you want to talk about, I'm here to talk to you. So I appreciate you for hanging out with us tonight. Shawna, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a lot of fun. I love these characters already. I can't wait to see more of them. And I can't wait to finish these up for you. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. And be safe, be healthy. And we'll see you all soon.